Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if after 3rd Hokage dead Naruto built harem with Sakura Shunkiba and Team 8 Part 1. And if you enjoyed this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Clouds weaving between peaks like snakes in the air so fresh and thinning. 6,572 steps was what it took to reach its gates from the shrine at sea level, and those who made its journey could attest to sore muscles in a peaceful climb. And despite their shameless reputation, Ikumo Anyong could be noted with 3 distinct features: their upstanding views on justice, their refusal to back down, and the loyalty they held not for the village but everything the village should stand for. They never once had any particular interests in other villages' individual shinobi aside from leverage and special techniques, and they knew they never would. Today marks the 1-month mark of the Konoha team's capture, Sirs, Mabui reported diligently. Her deep green eyes were alight in their depth as both her and Daru offered up their full attention. There has not been a single attempt at escape since their capture, though the guards have noted that they each have recently started exhibiting unusual behaviors. Unusual, I repeated, throwing his arms over the back of the long red couch that served as his office seat. Daru stood just to the side, his hands in his pockets and the usual dull look on his face. Light spilled into the room from the windows that acted as most of the walls. Yes, Reikit-sama, it appears they are teaching themselves, she said as she glanced down at the clipboard in her arms to make sure she was understanding it correctly. The guards hadn't been too sure they were documenting it correctly, but the opinions offered by the attending medics have confirmed that all 3 Konoha shinobi have been participating in some form of self-education. Quote, Daru exhaled softly. Sounds boring, but still, his attention remained sharp as ever. We asked for their names in the beginning and Intel has determined that they did not lie and their identities are who they said they were, and we have been gathering information on them since, she continued. Ed, the one in the large jacket and glasses is Aburam Shino. He has been self-mutilating his body and healing the injuries he's caused. This includes breaking bones, tearing muscle, and slashing veins. The guards have not intervened thus far, but medics come in twice a week to assure he's never near death. Mabui, in all her respectful professionalism, couldn't help the slight furrow in her brows. I and Daru exchanged startled glances. The one with the fangs is Inuzuka Kiba and the canine is his partner, Akamaru. He has been draining blood to write seal theories on the walls. He's completely written over the floor in 2 of the 4 walls of his cell, and is halfway through the 3rd. Quote, A's whole face scrunched in confusion. That's the one without part of her left arm is Sakura, no surname. She has been going through physical exercises to the point of such overexertion that she passes out. In her latest collapse she has not woken in 3 days, and medics had to hook her up to an IV. The guards have said that she sleeps from midnight to 4 in the morning precisely and the schedule is only interrupted by states of unconsciousness. Quote, discomforting quiet filled the office for a beat before I spoke. And who exactly are these 3? Mabui glanced down at her clipboard once more. They're a team who competed and passed the most recent Chunin exams. Quote, the one interrupted by Orochimaru and Suna's coordinated attack. Yes, sir, she confirmed. This is the first mission they've taken on as official Chunin. Our sources have confirmed it is at least AB rank and is speculated to have to do with the kidnappings around the Sekai Sea. We don't know exactly which island the Chunin were assigned to, but the trail we followed led to Koinobori Island. Fishy. It's the first word that would pop into anyone's mind hearing that the first time. Investigating kidnappings, even somewhere as remote as the Sekai Sea Islands, could never constitute as AB rank. It's A rank in the very least and everyone involved should have known that. And B ranks were only assigned to experienced Chunin, so what were fresh out the exam shinobi doing on it? Not to mention they'd gone to the Colosseum and came out alive. They remained at the Colosseum for nearly a month and a half before they retreated to the islands near Lightning, where 3 of the 4 of them have been captured by our border patrol. Quote, "The Aburam are a noble clan in Kanoa," Daru noted, his hands slowly coming out of his pockets. "Surely word has spread that something's happened to the team and a search party, no matter how small, has been sent for them. Or an alert. You know, something." Mabui shook her head, a troubling feeling seeping through her facade in the way her ring finger twitched against her clipboard. "As far as we know, no action has been taken for their retrieval. What's even stranger is that the team believes no one will come for them and has informed us of as such upon their arrival. Of course we thought them to be bluffing, but now, a month later." A's thick eyebrows pulled together and a scowl twisted his lips. What game was Kanoa playing? What, they were just going to send an inexperienced Chunin team so far off, so close to the destruction of their home village? Had it been his plan, the Chunin would help with the rebuilding while the upper shinobi divisions would be out collecting funds for construction and the other internal issues. The Kanoa Council was old enough to understand that much. "There are a couple more disconcerting details," Mabui started. She pressed her twitching finger flat against the board and met the eyes of both her boss and comrade with a posture of concern. Civilians who followed up on Koinobori Island have reported that it has more or less been reduced to ashes, and it's speculated the Chunin team had a hand in the destruction. Though when taking into account Border Patrol's report of the day of their capture and the prison guard's daily observatory ons, we're also led to believe that the team had been attacked and restrained minutes before being found by our forces." I was suddenly on his feet. "Take me to this Kanoa team," he demanded. C walked up and down the short corridor of 3 separate, but occupied cells. His eyes went from the way one boy set himself up to break another one of his bones. "If it's his ankle or shin he'll do this time, he'll never know until he hears a resounding crack," to the other boy who ripped at his ski and with his fangs so that his fingers dripped with the blood he used to keep on writing what he was trying to figure out. "He's at a loss for," to the girl who'd been dead to the world for 3 days and counting, how she managed to willingly drive herself to such a state was a cause for concern. And back to the first. All of their items had been confiscated and sent to the analysis division to determine if they were full of traps or jutsu, but nothing had been found. These were Kanoa dogs, despicable shinobi, enemies to the Kumogakure name, those whose words could not be trusted. Yet, he couldn't shake what the girl told him before sinking into her current state. "We're of no use to you, Anyong-san," she told him quietly, respectfully, but with no cowed head. "We have nothing to give you, and Kanoa won't give anything for us. If we tell them we do indeed have you, send proof. Make sure this isn't some measly threat." She stared him straight in the eye. "Then you're just wasting your time," she said. "Inexperienced Chunin are expendable." And she didn't break his gaze until he was the one to look away. C grit his teeth. None of this made any sense. These brats, these baby-faced Chunin, couldn't be here for no reason. There was no way, and the only possible information they could extract was clan jutsu or something along those lines, because they were too low of a rank to hold any substantial information about their village, and for some odd those seals examined on the backs of their tongues were determined to be cursed seals, the worst sort of fuinjutsu meant to block verbal freedoms. Prisoners had those, or special forces. But the way Border Patrol had found them injured and incapacitated. He shook his head and sighed. They had what seemed like infinite injuries, amputations, cursed seals on their tongues, brands in the shape of mice on the backs of their necks. And now, they had the prisoner identification bands Kumo tattooed on their forearms. If every shinobi in the world could list every assault on their person throughout their whole careers, half of those wouldn't be half as long as those Kanoa Anyong. She peered into the cell with the Inuzuka and his partner. Both of them were pressed up against an unbloodied corner with the boy's shoulders hunched up to his ears as he tucked his face into white fur. At the sound of the door being thrown open, the Kumu forced a blank face and turned towards the sound. Quickly, his heels snapped together and his spine straightened. "Reikut-sama," he saluted. I strode in and came to a brisk stop at the cell on the floor. "The Aburams. I have finished today's medical assessment of the prisoners. Would you like an oral report of the findings? Is it any different than the other reports?" "Negative, sir." "Then save it for your written report and get me into this cell." Mabui and Daru stood next to see as a guard unlocked the metal door and stepped through the entryway. And he had to pause. When he heard of these Chunin, he was expecting someone who looked, well, like a shinobi. Maybe time at the Colosseum would have them weathered a bit and maybe they'd be more on the sickly side due to the treatment they most likely would have suffered at the hands of such an institution. But he wasn't expecting to see a kid. The boy slumped against the wall had cuts up and down his arms and all across the visible parts of his leg, all of them smeared in dried blood and callously healed so the scars were ripped and jagged. The ink of the identification band stuck against his skin. A half-lidded eye glanced up while the other was merely a socket, an old injury, by the look of it, but an unsettling one nonetheless. The chakra controlling cuffs around his wrists and ankles made him look smaller, too, and I almost felt bad just having to look at him. "Reikut-sama," the boy greeted quietly. His roughened voice churned out of his throat like an unoiled gear. "What can I do for you?" A's brows scrunched. "Name, Aburam Shino. How did you come to Lightning Country?" Quote, "By boat from the Colosseum. I believe the island it was on is called Koinobori." A shaky breath left his lips as his body sank even further into the concrete. But he held himself up. Quote, "It was burning when we left. If it's not gone, we will continue to set fire to it until it is." Behind him, Daru and Mabui shared a look. She pressed his lips together. "What village do you hail from?" "Konoha. You say they won't come for you?" Quote, "Yes. Why?" Quote, "Why?" Shino repeated. His eye closed and he went silent for a whole minute. I didn't budge as each second ticked by, even if the tension notched up bit by bit in the unwavering silence. But the boy shifted, using his heels to push him backwards and help prop him up. Quote, "Because we were never worth it." His head tapped against the wall and some of his cuts began to bleed. I backed up into the hall. His open white hori swished at his knees as he made his way back out the cell block, Mabui and Daru following close behind. "Lock it back up and start on more permanent security measures," he ordered. "The Konohans are gonna be here a while. And the door shuts, just see and a couple guards left in the hall." After a beat, she took hold of the door and started to push it closed, but not before Shino spoke up again. Much softer, much hoarser, much younger. My team. Quote, "They're alive," she informed. Shino exhaled out his nose. Thank you." She had no reply for that. He didn't know if it was from the shock of decency or that he had nothing in him to humor a prisoner of the village, but he shut the door without another word and sent out a pulse of his chakra to lock it. Konoha dogs. Baby-faced Chunin. Prisoners. Kids. He left the cell block for the day and headed straight for the hospital. It was almost time for his shift. Didn't know what he was doing, standing in the hall of this floor of the prisoner's block like this. The thick metal of a door stood between him and the cell he stared at, but the key was in the tips of his fingers and the guards knew better than to stop him if he chose to do something unexpected. He was both a personal support of the Yondaime Reikage and a high-level medic operating at Sirius Central Hospital, the largest medical center for shinobi and shinobi-related research. It was a pride of his, being able to offer his services. Not many Kumo and Yong became medics, and even then, most of those who did gravitated towards the field instead of allowing themselves to be sequestered in their village's high peaks. He understood the feeling. Truly, he did. There was a certain thrill of staying alive to heal in the midst of battle instead of watching comrade after comrade get wheeled into a white room and never knowing if it would be your own fault if they couldn't be saved. But that didn't erase the issue of the slowly declining number of available medics at all their facilities. The civilian doctors did their jobs well, but there would always be cases they could never have a hope of taking on themselves. Kumo needed medics. And there was one on the other side of that thick metal door using chakra he wasn't supposed to have access to and wasting it on healing cuts and breaks and strains he inflicted on himself. Self-education, Mabui described it as. She tapped a finger against his thigh. Another. Again. He turned and walked out of the hall. : What do you mean you are putting off the surgery? He doesn't have 3 more days. Quote. There's no one who can take it. What about Q? He hasn't had any dose in 5 days. Where the hell's Arishi? Cack. We just got a squad in from. C-SPAN almost shattered in his grip as he braced himself on one of the admin counters, 6 or 7 files under his hands. The common behind him wasn't new, far from it. Medics couldn't operate on a 24/7 basis, and that was what Cirrus needed, especially with their dwindled numbers and the fact that the entire staff was stretched too thin. The smaller specialty clinics like Cumulus Memorial or Nimbus Point tried their best to accommodate extra patients when they couldn't. Stratus Medical Center was a civilian-only facility, leaving the medics with no other option but to buck up until they passed out from chakra exhaustion. He rubbed at his eyes and the bags he was sure were puppling under them. He thought about the ragged staff, the patients, the sleep he hadn't gotten in almost 52 hours. He thought about a thick metal door. He gritted his teeth and leaned forward over the files. 2 of them needed paperwork done for surgeries and the others needed their daily checks to be cleared and handed off to the nurses. What he tried not to think about was how much lighter the medic workload would be if there was another trainee. The body in the hospital. : The guard who marked his arms told him the ink was made out of a small tree native only to wind and lightning country. Ground and crushed and mixed into a rich brown paste, the brush dipped into it wound around his forearms 3 times, twice by the wrists and once near the elbow. Each band was broad, maybe 3 or so centimeters wide, and burned with the chakra that traveled from hand to hilt to bristle to skin. The ink was a stain, the guard had said. Without chakra application, it'd fade in a few weeks, and it made for a lot of design and tradition among the Sinese. But its permanence marked its prisoners with its earthy color, tethering them far away from the clouds. The guard chuckled a bit, then. Just a bit of Kumo superstition. Shino thought the bands would look nicer if he'd chosen to wear them. The metal cuffs covered most of the first band, and the second and third were littered with all sorts of scars from the cuts he tore himself and healed with all the chakra he could pull from his restraints. The collars from Nezu and company were harsher and left him wheezing and struggling to focus, but these ones only left him winded and tired, and before he knew it, he'd be waking up some time later with new scars and the same locked door across his cell. But we don't have to fight anyone here, he murmured to himself. We don't have to kill. We don't have to watch our backs. He shifted, and his bare feet skimmed along the hard floor. The plain black pants they issued him caught a bit of dust at the bottom hem, and the matching shirt was thick anew. To keep the concrete school touch off his back. We're still alive. They're still alive. Ah, they're still alive. He shook his head and dragged his knees to his chest. They are. They'll survive. They will. Why? It's what we do best. Always. His Kikai hummed in assurance. But he didn't know how long he could keep believing it himself. Just as he wrapped his arms around his waist and settled himself against a corner, if it was night or day he wouldn't know, and his eyes were slipping closed. A thrum echoed in his ears and the door swung open. It wasn't the wreckage this time. It was the blonde medic. Though he wasn't as blank-faced as all the other times he'd seen him. His arms were crossed and his shoulders weren't as rigid as they usually were, and the frown that marred his fuck. He was nothing like the simple flat line that normally met him. "Can you stand?" the medic asked. Shino answered by pushing himself up to his feet, only swaying once and catching himself on the wall before he could tip over. The other granted him a once-over before motioning for him to step out of the cell and to follow him down the hallway. He did so with no reluctance. His back straightened, his shoulders pulled back, and he set his eyes straight ahead of him. His arms were nothing but crisscrosses of burgundy scabs, and there was a dugout valley that peeked up the collar of his shirt, pink and half-healed. Not a sound spilled out his mouth as they passed the wary, yet curious guards and walked down the spiraling flights into what Shino assumed was the P. Rissen's confiscation repository. The medic picked up a tattered green jacket, inspected the sleeves for a few beats, then shoved it the boy's direction. "Wear it," he ordered. Shino did, but only for the ends of the sleeves to stop half a palm length away from his wrists and for the back to saint. Reached out over his shoulders, and it suddenly dawned on him how long he'd been staring at plain grey walls since Kumo, since the Colosseum. Since Sai. Shino's whole world blurred and refocused in what to him felt like merely a second, but it must have been a long enough time for the medic to have. He left and come back with another jacket. He, again, said nothing as he shucked off his tea-green coat for one the same Kumo grey color the guards wore. The sleeves brushed against the beginnings of his thumb, covering both the cuffs and the bands. "Is this protocol for your prisoners?" The medic, who'd taken his wrists to push up the sleeves and wrap bandages around his forearms, barely glanced upward at the query. "Protocol for pre-execution." Quote, the bandaging on his left arm was pulled a little too tight. Black eyes snapped up to his. Fire sparked in its dark depths as the medic finished wrapping his arms and straightened. "Why is that your expectation?" Quote, "Why would it not be?" Shino replied. His arms fell to his side. "Your border patrol didn't kill us when they found us. You have everything that was once in our possession. You've learned you can't glean important information because of the seals on our tongues." He paused, but didn't notice the paper-thin crease that sprouted between his brows. "What month is it, Medic-san?" "November." Quote. Ah, it was sort of bright in the repository. His kikai crawled along his insides, their spindly legs idly weaving and idly wondering if he would get his glasses back to shield his sensitive eye. But he didn't think he'd get them back. What use would glasses be for the dead? We'd left Konoha sometime in August. It was fall in Konoha. Sakura said she'd found a persimmon tree on one of their D ranks outside the village, and after a more than enthused Kiba made her promise to take them there when it ripened so he could see how much he could stuff into his mouth at once. November would have been perfect. Perhaps it's selfish of me, but I suppose I wouldn't mind being the first to die. Shino muttered more to himself and his insects than the other in the room. His gaze sought out his glasses on the other side of the room. He stared at its blurred outline, missing the paper-thin crease deepening on the medic's face. "I'd die knowing they're still alive. Because if I was the last one to go, the last they." He trailed off and met the medic's blank stare. "My team." He didn't know this was a medic whose reserve was slowly crumbling around his eyes at the sight of someone whose 13 years were not long enough to fear the deaths of others or the death of himself. This was it. This was the one. The worst decision he'd ever made in his entire life. If only he didn't give in to the pressures of the hospital, the sight of his friends and co-workers falling to fatigue and exhaustion and to the voices in their heads berating Th.M. for not being able to do enough. If only they didn't have this problem of too many patients and not enough interest in the healing arts to make up for the strain in the industry. If only he never knew about what was behind that thick metal door. They're alive, she answered, and you won't be dying today. He pulled out a pair of Kumo-issued sandals off one of the shelves and set it at the boy's feet before snatching up the orange glasses and throwing them over as well. You are now a Shino without a surname who grew up in a small village along Lightning's border. You have medical training and have come to Kumogakure to expand on it, and I am the superior that has signed off on your request to work at Ceres Central Hospital, he said. Your restraints will now allow you access to your chakra as long as it converts to medical chakra upon release. Your Kikaichu are to stay out of sight. You are never allowed anywhere without supervision. And, he leaned forward, a mask of complete apathy on his face. No one will ever learn who you are, nor will anyone see a millimeter of your forearms or the cuffs at your ankles that the sandals will hide. Is that understood? Shino turned his uncracked glasses in his hands and wiped a smear of dirt off the right lens with his thumb. He slipped them on and thought of Aoba. Understood, Medic-san. The blonde nearly scoffed as he ushered him out a back entrance of the building. My name is C. ... This was an absolutely terrible idea. ... Sato Akemi unlocked the door to her shop when the sun started to barely crest over the horizon. Normally she wouldn't be so early, but a couple shipments were set to arrive in an hour and she promised the delivery man she wouldn't make him wait as long as he did last time because, well, it hadn't been her fault her alarm clock had fizzed out on her that morning, but she'd make sure to come extra early just in case. As the lock clicked and she took a single step through the threshold, a particularly chilly breeze swept past H. And goosebumps rose on the skin of her arms. Her wind chimes rattled, and there was nothing behind her but a cloudless sky and the beginning of a perfect day. ... We can feel December's breath in our bones. ... Mabui's heels were silent on the stone stairs as she ascended to one of the higher floors of the building. Katatumbo Penitentiary didn't typically carry too many inmates and hadn't held prisoners from another country in years. They'd been lying low since the failed abduction of the Hyuga heiress nearly a decade past, and shinobi from other nations were smart in avoiding their borders. Katatumbo didn't even have 15 current occupants. As a shinobi prison, one would think it a relatively low number compared to the 50+ civilian staccato detention centers held. She nodded at the guards as she entered the hall and looked into the first cell. It was empty, and this time she didn't panic, not like the first time. The guards had to jump to stop her from sounding the alarm and hastily explain something like, "See sane." She had him, or, it was Oshi-sensei's idea. And when she burst into the hospital for that blonde head of hair, she ran into Shino himself in the midst of assessing a group of new patients and handing off newly filled forms to the attending nurses. She'd been pulled aside by a near-disheveled C before she could reveal anything incriminating, and even though having a secret prisoner work for the betterment of Kumo wasn't necessarily a thing, the stats surrounding Ceres Central Hospital had been showing signs of a general increase, and she could "Aren't you with the numbers?" Reikert-sama tried to. His outrage sent his couch careening out the window, but after seeing how well the Aburam shouldered the extra work, in turn taking some of the bulk of the actual resident medics, the only punishment she received was sitting at the end of a 3-hour-long rent and getting taken off the mission roster for 6 months. Mabui peered into the next cell. Not too long ago the walls had been filled to the brim with nonsensical symbols and reasoning that wound around in circles and circles before they got back to the same place they started. The boy, the Inuzuka, had ripped off part of his black pants to scrub his dried blood off the walls so he had room to puzzle out even more of whatever ran through that mind of his canine watching the whole time while he crossed his shackled paws beneath his jaw. The last cell in the hall held the girl trudging through one-armed pull-ups while being hooked up to an IV drip. She was the only one of her team to request the guards for things, a wooden bar and a resistance band. The resistance band she tied to one end near the center of the wooden bar on the ceiling in the other end tied around to the remains of her left arm. Mabui quietly admired her resolve. She had noted her amputation had been recent in her initial examination, not more than a month old by the time Thay Wai landed in Kumu's clutches. She stepped away from the cell and made her way back down the hall. There were a few more things she had to do before reporting back to Reikit-sama, such as drop off some documents for the Cipher Division and collect the weekly update from the Seals Division. She paused in front of the middle cell again and rushed to peer through the small window in the door. Sharp eyes darted wall to wall, top to bottom, sentence to sentence of blood-tinted words and crude diagrams brought to life with the prick pad of a finger. Locks, matrices, sequences, layers, odds, evens, primes, margins, ratios. Sales, seal theory. Every single available concrete space was crammed with seal theory. When she tried to read those brown-crusted words in a new light, those circles made a little more sense in the way they curved and Thay starting points weren't at all the same with their tweaked angles and shifted perspectives. She didn't know how long she stood there gaping at the advanced scrawls, but by the time she reached the bottom of one of the walls, the dog had stopped into her line of vision with hunched hackles and eyes too guarded and wary to be anything intimidating. The Chunin stopped writing. "Huh, what's up, boy?" Akamaru barked lowly and he turned towards the small slip of a window on his locked door. But no one was there. Closing parenthesis. Kiba pat his partner on the head. Which one was it? A bark. Green eyes, silver hair. Not a guard. A small huff. Huh, wonder what she wants. He spun back on his heel and toward a wall as he pricked the scab pad of his pointer finger with one of his fangs and pressed it up against the concrete. Hey, Akamaru. Akamaru raised his head and it to the side. You think we're gonna rot here? You know, in a Kumu jail. There was silence as a tail thumped against the floor in consideration. His partner whined quietly before resting his head on the shackles around his front legs. Kiba's brow furrowed for the slightest moment and he sighed. Yeah, he murmured. At least it's not the Colosseum. He dragged his finger through another line of theory, even quieter, or getting stabbed in the back in Konoha. Mabui willed herself to move away from her place beside the chakra-sealed door, confusion in her eyes and an unfinished to-do list on the forefront of her mind. Her heels were silent. The North Guard lady didn't come by again for a while. Akamaru didn't notice anything and neither did he, though Kiba couldn't really say how long it had been. He could barely keep track of time back when they bulldozed through books and books of research and they had Sakura in the Colosseum to count down the days that passed to the hour. But here, no windows, no sun, no nothing. The guards brought in food twice a day at different times to really hammer in the loss of awareness and pushed it through a small hatch at the bottom of the door with a latch that could only open from the outside. He was surprised when the prison served them meat every other meal, unlike Nezu and company who'd only ever served them rice and vegetables. He thought Kumo was supposed to be the hard-ass country. There was the ringing click of the hatch and two plastic trays are pushed through the slot. Kiba reached to pull them close but stopped halfway when the hatch didn't shut as quickly as it usually did. Akamaru was immediately on his feet with his claws out and his legs set like a spring was coiled within them. A handful of seconds passed before a plain glass ink bottle and a cap brush was slipped through, followed by a manila folder with a post-it note on the front. What is the overlay? The hatch shut. Overlay, Kiba mumbled. Akamaru sniffed at the folder as he pulled it into his lap and flipped it open. Inside were pages of notes and chicken scratch of trying to puzzle out the complete seal overlay from the configurations written out on the first page. $2. Yeah, they probably want me to do some shit for but. He shuffled through more of the papers. What's the point? I'm Ju, some dumbass kid from Konoha. The folder shut and got tossed to the other side of the cell and the trays pulled forward. But hey, don't gotta use blood for the walls anymore, I guess. He shoveled unseasoned pork bites into his mouth, bloody writing at his back and his partner at his side. : 2 meals were served and the folder was still in the same place he'd tossed it. Keeper hated that more often than not he caught himself lingering on the folder in the post-it note as his fingers itched for something new to work on. There was only so much he could dig up from all the stuff he learned before, from what he could read in the library or what Iruka-sensei taught him in D. At this point, the theories on the walls were just him writing to write. But if he worked on whatever was in that folder, he groaned and slid onto the ground, capping the brush and setting it next to the near-empty ink bottle. Akamaru's tail thumped a couple of times against the floor as he swung his head around to look at his partner. I really wanna look at that overlay stuff, but it'd be like me doing Kumo a favor, right? Kiba asked. Why would I do something like that? Akamaru stared at the folder for a few moments and woofed. Yeah, I guess. I'm asking why I should do Kumo anything when Konoha never did nothing for us either. Wasn't that right? When Sarutobi Hiruzen was alive, he'd done the equivalent of cutting off their tongues and sending them on mission after mission in hopes they'd never make it back for another. And after his death he damned them again by turning them chunin by decree and somehow letting Dan Zo have his way, letting Sai them all over. Kiba exhaled through his nose. No, he shouldn't blame Sai. He should be blaming himself for thinking he could trust him. When the small hatch opened next and 2 trays were slid through, the folder was pushed out before it closed, the inside cover D in freshly dried ink and the finished overlay boxed on the very last page. : It's all correct. Correct. This work is borderline ingenious, the CS technician exclaimed as he spread the notes on the table. Mabui peered at the one particular sequence he pointed out. Take this for example. The team and I tried to work it from top to bottom, then bottom to top, as one normally goes about figuring how to complete sequences in matrices or anything of the length. He then pointed at the writing, not quite in the middle, but close. Maybe a few characters off. But this is the starting point. Clearly marked, too. I don't know how you could possibly start so off-center, but the outcome. It would have taken us maybe a week or 2 longer to go about it the usual way, but you took this a couple of days ago. He turned to her fully, eyes wide and shining. Who managed to solve it so quickly? I'd love to have someone like that on the team. Oh, Mabui smiled, easily covering up the quiet anxiety trembling beneath her professional front. When I received your weekly update and found you to be struggling with this particular seal, there was an associate I've come across who I believed could help. It seems my hunch was not only a hunch. The CS technician knew that the term, associate, was more or less a nod to the fact that whoever managed to solve an advanced overlay like that one was meant to be kept on the down low or not even mentioned at all. He shrugs it off. It wasn't like he was a stranger to shinobi affairs. You know, if those scrolls you'd taken off those prisoners hadn't been marked highly classified, I'd be hunting down that associate right now to try and get them to break those locks, he sighed. Mabui's expression tightened slightly. Well, of course Inuzuka would be able to break those locks since it looked like he'd been the one to craft them himself, and it was something the CS technician didn't see. Could your associate come down one of these days? It would really help us out. A bead of cold sweat ran down the back of her neck. I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much, Mabui-senpai. She left the building with a particularly sharp pain in her forehead and an image behind her eyes of a bemused sea raising an eyebrow at her in his rare disbelief. : During the meal right after Kiba had sent the folder out, the hatch opened and a 3rd tray was slipped into the cell. On it was a plate of something that looks like pink cotton candy, but somehow thicker and gummier than anything he'd seen in Konoha. Thank you. The note read, "If there's anything you'd like, please let me know." A part of him wanted to snort and ask to be set free, but as he glanced down at the silver at his wrists and the dark brown embedded in his arms, he couldn't find the energy in himself to make the joke. He was tired. So tired. Kiba flipped the post-it note over and scrawled on it with the last of his ink before he slid it back through the hatch, and it shut. "I want to know if my team's okay." He went back to his meal not expecting an answer, and Akamaru sniffed his food before he latched onto a bone with quite a bit of marrow at the center. The hatch opened once more, slowly, and a soft voice floated through. It was deep and rich, and Kiba's mind immediately tacked it onto green eyes and silver hair. "They're all right," she told him. Before he could even think to reply, the hatch closed and it was quiet again. Just him, Akamaru, and the writing on the walls. : Kisame wasn't ashamed to admit that he'd felt relief when they weren't able to capture Uzumaki Naruto. It was a couple weeks back when they'd escaped the Toad Sanon's trap and reported back to leader empty-handed, but none of that deterred him even after they'd been dismissed by the static chrome of his projection. He'd taken to bugging Itachi about getting checked out by a medic one way or another, and if not for the whole thing with his lungs, then at least for his eyes that he'd overused. So here he was, sat in a too small plastic chair in a shinobi optical specialist's waiting room, rain pattering against the windows and the receptionist trying his best not to look him in the eye. Kisame glanced at the pile of old magazines at the short table to his left and picked up the one on tea. He top of the stack and leafed through it with unfocused eyes. Uzumaki was even smaller up close. At the Chunin exams he'd seen the boy on the other side of the arena, loud and impatient and smiling for pup. In the hallway in the middle of that tourist town, Kisame could see how short he really was, unkempt blonde hair, confused blue eyes, clothes a little too worn to be passed off as just from training. He didn't kill kids. Never had, never would. But he wondered just why Konoha wanted to kill one of their own kids by shoving a demon behind a baby's navel. He sighed and tossed the unread magazine back on the table. He leaned back, and the plastic creaked slightly under the movement. It would be a while until he could head back to Konoha since their new implementation of a stricter policy, meaning he couldn't check up on pup like he'd planned on originally. And all it took was an invasion by a literal Sanon to get them to up their security, he griped internally. A hand came down to rest on his left shoulder just beside his bandaged seal, and he looked up. Itachi and his faintly cloudy black eyes stared down at him. "Shall we?" Kisame stretched his legs and stood as he slipped his hat over his head. His partner followed suit as they both stepped into the rain-stained streets. True to AIM culture and produced from the Amex that lived there, the cement streets were covered in neon art almost ingrained in its foundation. Little paintings of things like cranes and frogs flowed bright orange and pink and green and purple under the torrential downpour. The scarce visitors that came were always amazed. The natives knew it wasn't just art. Kisame remembered how Pup would always hop on the green lily pads when they walked the streets at night, her bright laughter echoing in his ears. The memory was grainy, now. He hadn't heard her laugh in so long. "Hey, Itachi-san, let's head that tea house ya like. I'm kinda cravin' that orange spice tea they got." Itachi tilted his head. It's been a while since I've had their green tea." They walked along the gleaming caricatures beneath their sandals in a village where red lanterns hung over the streets and neon signs brightened the skies in a way the sun never could. : In January we've lost a winter. : B. I'm serious. And I'm tellin' you not sweat, so wise what you're doin' is fret. Slammed his fist against the desk and a crack ran through the center. You know damn well why I am. Because once you get an idea in that damn thick head of yours, I need to send at least 3 of my top shinobi to stop you before you try. He sighed and shook the splintered wood from his hands. Don't look into it. Please. Two of them are already off the leash and that's enough of a headache as it is. 2. A glared. B raised two placating hands. Lips sealed. That the deal. Won't do nothing that'll wrinkle that mug, bro. Quote. Gyuki snort echoed in his head as he slipped out the office and straight towards the exact place he told his brother he wouldn't near. Of all the things you could have invested yourself in, this is what you choose. I shouldn't be surprised. You are telling me those secret Konoha and Young locked up ain't interesting. I'm telling you that you should listen to your brother and heed the potential consequences of your actions, dumbass. Single quote. Well, you can sit back and watch the show cause I'ma find out what I wanna know. Gyuki huffed and said nothing else. Killer Bee chuckled under his breath at his friend's exasperation before he stepped into the chilled air of Kumo's high peaks. Even though he walked down the smaller streets with less vendors and even less people, he could see the neat, slanted overhangs and the benches and gazebos perched atop roofs. Stairs were attached on the sides of each building that wound up to the gazebos and suspended bridges crisscross over the streets, shadowing markets and walkways and where civilians could traverse over more than just the ground. The Kumor had always wanted to be as far from the ground as they could. Maybe that was why all the children learned to scale steeps and cliffsides as quickly as they learned to walk. He smiled and waved at someone sweeping up the front of their shop. The owner took one look at him and promptly turned their back to continue sweeping. B had spent over 20 years staring at the turned backs of those who wanted nothing to do with him, that the action didn't lessen his grin as he continued on his way. The younger villagers tolerated him much more than the older ones did, which was far more that he could have asked for, but was it wrong to wish he'd meet someone who didn't already have an image of what type of person he'd be? Just because he wasn't like them. Just because one of his closest friends had ravaged the village even before he was born. Couldn't they just give them a fair chance? B. He replied aloud. Say something, Gyu. The Hachibi didn't respond as Katatumbo crawled into his sights. Killer Bee instantly perked up and didn't even try to sneak past the guards. He strolled through and they were either too intimidated or knew better than to stop him. He was quick to traverse up the stairs to the flood he'd been specifically ordered not to go to and burst through the door. The guard stood between the confiscation repository and the hallway of cells, almost slumped at the sight of him. B-sama, you're not supposed to be here. Reikut-sama gave clear instructions for you not to be on the penitentiary's premises, she said. Damn, how long ago did I give the order? Could I advise that you train instead? Or to check in with the wall patrol since it's part of your duty as village guardian? Sman Enmu, let me see one of the Konohans. What's the worst I could do? They got their chakra locked as far as I heard, and I'm just wondering what stirred the word on these birds. Enmu-san wasn't amused, but her black painted lips twitched and her pale pink eyes narrowed. Tell you what, if I get in and you don't tell my bro, I'll snatch you one of those burgers by the grotto. Quote. Sheer blondish white brow that was nearly as pale as her own skin. I guess I get why you're so interested in those kids. No one really knows about them, but the ones that do can't really get a read on what's what. Quote. B blinked behind his dark glasses as the smile slowly faded from his face. Kids. Enmu jerked her head towards the hall and settled back against one of the walls. Check it for yourself, B-sama. She tilted her head. And I want a burger for lunch tomorrow from the blue shack in front of the Cracked Arch. The Cracked Arch was one of the bigger grottos and had more locals hanging from the ledges than bats. He hummed absently as he slipped into the hall. The first cell was empty and so was the second, but the third cell. A girl with pink hair with one arm held herself in a handstand. Drenched skin stretched taut over hardened muscle and there was no lapse in her form. Her toes pointed towards the ceiling and the ivy drip taped to the junction of her elbow ran as smoothly as the sweat that dripped from the tip of her nose to the cold hard floor. So the prisoner's really a kid. Single quote. And a Konoha shinobi caught within our borders, Gyuki reminded him firmly. Don't get any ideas, B. You've already done enough by disobeying your brother. Go home. I just told Enmu I'd buy her a burger to not talk to a prisoner. Nah, Gyu, that's a waste. B. Don't. B's hand was already on the door. The locks immediately began to open, and that mischievous part of his brain was always so smug that no matter the security clearance, his chakra would always be recognized as per the requirements of the village guardian. Position. He squeezed through the smallest crack of the door he could manage and closed it behind him just as quick. The girl stayed planted on her hand for a long few seconds before she lowered on foot on the ground, then stood to full height. It surprised him that the top of her head reached taller than his shoulder. You're not one of the guards usually in this building, she said. He browed and leaned back against the concrete. And why's that you're thinking when you're just a cucumber in this cell pickling? Quote. When she turned to face him fully, her black prisoner's shirt did nothing to hide those rippling scars that spanned from her shoulder blade to her jawline and ended ripped and ragged at the bottom of her cheek. Though it wasn't her appearance that quite caught him, but it was the lingering chakra of whatever caused it that pulled at his senses. It was familiar. It was angry. It was just like Gyu's. Your hands, she answered. Her gaze flickered down at them. They're not the same ones that deliver the meals, so it's either you're a new guard that's paid me a visit or you're not a guard at all. She held her hand behind her back, the IV tube swaying slightly with the movement. Her chin never dipped. What can I do for you? Respectful is the first word that popped into mind at her display, which was surprising in itself considering young shinobi never have their arrogance curbed until they lose themselves in their first kills or their first capture or the first time they needed to obey an order they could only wish to forget. He was curious, did she stand tall because she didn't know what she was doing or because she knew all too well what she'd gotten into? B pointed to the IV bag. Why've they got you hooked up? I trained until I can't and they don't want me dead. No, but I don't know why. Her fingers curled beneath the thin plastic tube and gave it a light tug. Konoha has no warmth for Kumo and vice versa, and you must have realized we're worth nothing more th. And wild animals you happen to pick up on your borders. Green eyes were blank and cold and not so bitter, and it cast an eerie light in the dim prison cell. I'm waiting for my execution, sir, but I didn't think I'd be waiting this long. Quote. Gyu hadn't said anything in a while, but B could clearly see him in his mind's eye. The beast quietly observed the exchange, his 8 extra arms stuck beneath him and his 2 main ones crossed over his chest. Her name, ask for it. He rolled his eyes beneath his glasses and passed on the message. The girl raised one of her brows. Sakura. No surname. Konoha never really had interesting shinobi. Maybe there were a few autumn leaves in the sea of green like Kiroi Senko, the yellow flash, or Ichitsuku Goroshi, the clan killer, but the pink is new. And, undoubtedly, one of the more interesting things he'd come across these days. Sakura, then, he acknowledged simply. B left the cell after that, stopping at the end of the hall and at the receiving end of one of Enmu's deadpan looks. Did you get what you came for? She asked. Didn't know what I came for. Not really, he said. He jerked a thumb at his head. But I got something up here, ideally. Keep it hush, shush, word's not gonna get out, but I think I found an interesting sprout. Quote. Enmu's forehead wrinkled like she wanted to argue, but she only sighed noisily and rubbed the bridge of her nose. I really can't keep up with you, B-sama. Single quote ... I wonder if there was someone out there, he thought as he set out of Katatumbo for the day. Someone other than a that could keep up with me. ... Sakura had her head pressed against one of the walls when the stranger walks in again. She counted just a little over 24 hours before he'd shown up again, but she didn't open her eyes or push away from the wall when she heard his sandals tap gently against the floor. There was a faint rustle, and she figured he crouched to be at least eye level with her. "Is it raining?" she asked. "Shower started some time ago. Supposed to creep through the day all snail's pace slow," he replied. "What, can you tell from here? The building's soundproof, ya fool." Her father once told her the rains in Ames were unnatural. He always joked about God and his temper, God and his complex, and she loved the little stories he thought up for her. But it wasn't until she was a bit older and a bit wary that she began to understand why Leader Sama was worshipped just as much as he was feared. He laced his chakra in the rain, she figured. And maybe that was why even when the skies were blue and clear over Kannur, she would always know when to tell Kiba not to keep Akamaru outside for too long. "But I was right." Guess you were." She opened her eyes and faced the stranger to find him with a hand on his chin and his gaze far off and considering. Two blue tattoos sat just beneath his left eye along that socket bone, and there were more swords strapped to his back than seemed sensible. Not a guard, a regular force shinobi, maybe. Maybe not. He must be high enough to gain clearance to sit around her cell doing nothing and looked old enough to have established himself as someone important in the village. Idly, she cursed herself at not having kept up to date on Kumogaka's history and politics. She'd been too busy digging up Kannur's and Suna's pasts and problems, but she knew that wasn't an excuse. "All right then," the stranger decided. He stood and popped open the door. "Let's go." He disappeared from her line of sight and left the door wide open. Sakura blinked once before she slowly rose and shuffled to peer into the hallway. The stranger had his arms crossed as he waited near the end of it, bobbing his head side to side to a rhythm she couldn't hear. She glanced back at her cell, then the hall, then him. "Breathe in, out, straighten your back, lift your chin, not too much, never lower your eyes. This is not arrogance. This is not intimidation. This is practicality." She strode forward like there wasn't the weight of 3 other worlds on her shoulders. She would never know the way Gyuki's head tilted at the sight of her. Enmu Sound was halfway through her burger when the last prisoner of the hallway stepped into view. She stared. The girl stared back. After B took a cloak from the repository and handed it to the girl to slip on, Sound sunk her teeth into another bite of her burger and slumped against the wall. "B-sama, you do know that I am now required to inform Reikich-sama of your actions." Quote, "I'll have her back in the cell in a while," he waved. "Don't get tangled in your knots. I'll keep her low profile." They were both out before Sound could give another long-suffering sigh. Her groan echoed through the prison block before it was muffled by a mouthful of bread and buffalo patty. Kumogakure floated on the clouds. Sakura's gaze flickered at everything she could spot through the low hood in the light rain and saw the dozens of plateaus connected by the bridges that made up the village, all different heights with trees sticking out the sides with swings wrapped around their sturdy branches. She committed everything to memory. She tried, but the smell of something that isn't dust and concrete made her head spin. But dust and concrete was better than blood. They crossed to a plateau far from the main districts, raised much higher than most of the other platforms and dotted with steps carved into its side that wind all the way around, narrow and cracked and steeped. But even as she looked down at the clouds and the endless fall below, all she could think about was the air. Air was always thick with the musk of rainwater and the heat of neon signs. It was a scent of heavy spice from the curry stalls and moss that settles in the cracks and crevices of dark brick and stone. In Kannur, it was an air of green leaves and green tea and green stalks of flowers sold from the Yamanaka flower shop. It was an air of sun and sweat, of tree sap and woodwork. Kumo's air was thin like breathing hot air on a cold morning, and it was new. At the top of their silent climb they stepped onto a mesa with no boundaries and with their clothes soaked from the rain. Sakura tipped her head back, letting the droplets splatter on her cheeks. Pink hair ran down to just about the middle of her back, and she wondered just how long it had been. It no longer nagged her that it needed to be tied up and out of reach. But she supposed prisoners had no need for. The metal bands around her wrists' ankles release every last drop of her chakra, and with a face still turned up at the heavens that never smiled at her, she breathed. And instantly ducked away from the foot careening towards her head. Gyu, take a look. She dodged that hook I cooked and there's a fire in her eyes. Makes me wanna check just what she's gonna try. Single quote. The sky rumbled and he grinned as she aimed a kick to his face that he blocked. She used his arms to launch herself behind him to try and snag one of the swords on his back, but a pivot and his elbow was soaring for her stomach. She twisted hard enough that her cloak whipped off and she used the brief distraction to make another grab for a sword at his hip. Hey, I ain't gonna let you snatch one these, he chided. B gripped her hand and chucked her far enough that she slid to a stop just before she could topple off T. He Mesa, these blades right here you ain't allowed seize. Afraid I'll break them, she called out as she swiped a trickle of blood from the corner of her mouth. Afraid you'll bring me tears with a bad form, fool, ya fool. He laughed. Konohans don't know how wield a sword if it's the last thing they do. You, spec me believe what's difference gonna be you. Sakura flexed her fingers, all 5 of them up to count. If you don't think Konohans are at your level, then how does an Amek compare to a Kumor? She's Amek, Gyuki hummed. He plopped his chin on his hand as he watched her through his host's eyes. Explains the attitude with the rain. An immigrant to Konoha then, maybe oi. B unsheathed the sword from his back and threw it blade first. She let it pass over her shoulder until the start of the hilt slid just past her peripheral, and her hand came up to lock around the red bandages. Not a goosebump on her skin came from the chilled rain, and he snorted. Definitely an Amek. He took a single sword for himself. Single quote ... B. I want the truth. Even with only one arm she held the sword like it was her own, tipped slightly in front of her and knees slightly bent and ready for actio. N. She lunged. So did he. What's on your mind, Gyu? Most of her blocks are in perfect form save for the blows he directed at her left side. She wasn't used to the opening and it was obvious, but her determination made up for it with awkward angles and the way it was like she was meant to see a wire blade. What are you doing? B shunshed behind her and twisted a free hand in her hair while the other pressed sharpened silver against her neck. But just as quick as he trapped her he lost her, and he was left with a dense clump of pink snagged on his calluses as she retreated to the other end of the mesa. She'd taken the weapon, held it to the base of her skull, and sheared it all the way up. He blinked, and she sunk into another fighting stance. The rain pelted harder and the clouds were at their darkest grey, and as the sky is filled with lightning, he found himself log-heeing amongst the thunderclaps as he twirled the sword in his hand. Let's roll, kid. : You never answered me, Gyuki said after B locked Sakura back in her cell with a dry set of prisoner uniforms and skillfully avoided sound to avoid any questions. By night the rain had let up some, but there was no use in getting dry until he got back home. You wasted your whole day humoring that little Amek. Little, she's way taller than Enmu. All you humans are insignificant, but that's beside the point. The beast snapped. The girl, B, why did you bring her out of the cell? Why did you fight her? Why did you lend her one of your swords? Why did you bother? Until your brother comes to a decision about them, they're prisoners on death row and shouldn't be treated as comrades. What are you thinking? Nothing much, really, Gyuki drawled. And what exactly has kept you so occupied that you are forgetting your obligation to your duties? B walked onto one of the rope bridges that connect plateau to plateau, careful to mind the third step that had never been fixed. Since the day he broke through it nearly 7 years ago while he was running away from A. Then no, he shrugged. Probably the same stuff that got C in Mabui. The Hachibi sighed and rubbed a hand over his eyes. But B didn't listen, his hand stuck in his pockets and an old tune whistling past his lips. Yuki knew he should raise his voice to get his idiot's attention and try to knock some sense into that hollow head of his, but he heard the words that have been rattling around his host's brain since the day he heard it and relented with another loud sigh. I really can't keep up with you, B-sama. No Kumor could keep up with their Jinchuriki guardian, Killer B. So why did B think an Amek in Konohan clothing could? Senju Tsunade was the fifth Hokage and she couldn't give any less of a damn about what everyone else thought about it even if she tried. She spent her days in her office with a bottle of sake on her desk and a sharp tongue to lash if anyone came to her with stupid shit laced on their tongu. Hell, she'd already garnered a reputation of an iron fist after reducing an incompetent nurse to tears with a single sentence and demolishing a wall of the hospital when they couldn't make up their minds about costs of expansion and filling her ears with useless whines and drivel. But currently, the one thing that pissed her off to no end lay on her desk. 6 broken pens piled up by her chair and her assistant, one Kato Shizune, stood just out of range of the Hokage's blast zone as she clutched Taunton close to her chest. 3 stacks of paper were stacked heavy beside her desk and 10 more smaller stacks sat innocently around her workspace. Why is there so much paperwork today? She managed out of ground teeth. It's, Susunade-sama, the system these papers go through is a long process and only now have all of these been approved for you to read and sign, and Tsunade-sama, we just got the desk yesterday. Get me the damasas in charge of this useless system right now. She demanded, a fist through her brand new desk. Shizune quickly bowed and sprinted from the office without a second to spare as pages flew all around her. And somewhere, buried under stacks and stacks of papers and folders and staples, there was an unread report from a mission assigned over 5 months prior. In February we've lost a home. A sat facing the windows, his office empty save for the steaming cup of tea on his desk and the completed stack of paperwork just waiting to be picked up by the errand boy that would come by in a few hours. His head rested in his palm and his fingers curled against his goatee. It was a nice day out. And he was pretty sure those Konoha Chunin were enjoying it just as much as the next Kumo citizen. He tipped his head back to rest against the couch, eyes on the wooden ceiling. He wanted to hate what's been happening. He wanted to bark at his shinobi and his assistant and his brother for what they were doing, taking the prisoners without his permission and entreating them like were one of their own. Absurd. Especially since they were the damn Konoha lot who couldn't be trusted no matter how much they preached about peace and unity and teamwork. Scoffed. Teamwork. Unity. Tell that to the Uchiha and the Senju that built up that village starting from a single plank, but could never again come together for that peace. The prisoners should already be dead. They were forcefully sealed. He swallowed a grimace and shoved off the sympathy that crawled over his shoulders, and squeezed dry of anything useful. He was going to have the Aburam killed first, but C had snatched him up and thrust him into Sirius Central Hospital hoping for a cure for the overworked medics and, well, it worked. I was hesitant to admit it, but the boy was sufficiently trained and had once sewn up a patient with a pack of flosser. ND Senbun when his chakra was no longer at his disposal, both entreating the other medics and giving C a heart attack at the crude, effective method of surgery. And that wasn't even mentioning the reports he'd been receiving from the SEALs division had been filled with glowing praise for the key. The prodigy Kiba from the same border town as Sirius new medic that Mabui brought along, who never followed the rules of step-by-step seal solving and rattled off the most bizarre theories that he gestured with fanged grins and poster-sized papers filled with his evidence. Akamaru is such a great addition to the team too. A sales decryptor once wrote, like a mascot, almost. I think the stress levels in the department have gone down having him come along. Then came the whispers of Killer Bee's new sparring partner, a Sakura with pink hair that could match him blow for our blow and always got back up even after accidentally getting tossed off one of the village's sparring plateaus. Rumor has it that she'd climbed all the way back up with her one arm and 2 feet until she'd hauled herself to the top 3 hours later, sweat blinding her eyes and her fist held up to keep fighting. He wanted to hate them. Wanted them locked back where no one knew who they were and regarded like the enemies they should be. He raised his head back up and watched some of the citizens hanging around the bridges as he leaned forward against his thighs. He wanted to hate them, but he remembered Kumogakure was built by the hands of runaways taken in by wandering monks until they were old enough to wander themselves. With no one to meet and nowhere for home, they walked until they found an abandoned shrine at the base of a mountain and built up. And since then, they welcomed all with no family and no place and promised to have all of that in the clouds, in Kumogakure. He sighed. Or at least, it was how the legend went and why most of the Kumo never had a surname. I saw heads of all colors, skins of all colors, backgrounds of all colors traversing the streets and sharing laughs and words like they've never known what it meant to be a stranger. It had been 5 months since 3 kids and a young dog had been captured on the borders of Lightning Country with tea. He had bands of a village that never came for them stuffed deep at the bottom of one of their bags. A student dug out an execution form from one of the cabinets. There was no date or official stamp, but the names had been printed on a long time ago. Inuzuka Kiba, Akamaru, Aburam Shino, Sakura, of Konohagakure. He crumpled the paper in one hand and let it roll into the trash. I wanted to hate them, but he didn't. Izumo diligently sorted through an entire binder of cleared mission reports to store down in the archives. Kotetsu had managed to skip out of this particular job, much to his grumpy displeasure, but his partner promised to get them take out from that soba stall on the other side of town and he couldn't find it in himself to complain too much. Some of the missions and reports weren't too bad to read through and the grumbling ones from the shinobi attending D ranks got a little snot out of him every now and again. Genin complaining about getting cats out of trees. Precious. The last report he had was stuffed in a slim folder with no note on the tab, so he flipped it open to check the date and ranking. He stopped at the sight of the face of Kotetsu's student staring blankly at him, a red Mia stamped across her picture. The next page, Soom's son. Mia, his young dog partner. Mia. Next page, Shibi's heir. Mia. At the ends of their profiles, presumed deceased. Shit, he whispered in the dim light of the archives. He could already see the look on Kotetsu's face when he hears the news. The red-rimmed eyes and the slack jaw and the way he'll disappear for a few days when he finds out that. Izumo snapped the folder shut and drew in a deep breath and morbidly, he thought. Unlucky 8, huh? Single quote. So if you're not, like, a CSI person, how come you knew I was good at it? Kiba drew his spoon through a bowl of dark red stew and took in some light-colored meat, a kinder jello cube, and a potato all at once. The spice hit him as quick as the heat and he swallowed without chewing as his mouth set aflame. What the is that? He whispered. Across from him, Mabui chuckled into her hand before taking a sip of her own meal. She didn't share the same visceral reaction and continued to eat like the devil himself wasn't in her food. I will admit that Tragopan blood stew is an acquired taste, but it's one of our milder dishes. Quote. Akamaru woofed around the yak bone he was gnawing on and lolled his tongue when his partner glared through watering eyes. Take some butter tea, it will help. Kiba downed the cup in one gulp and hung his tongue out his mouth, hoping the frost of Kumo's air that rolled in every time someone opened the front door could chill his taste buds, and Mabui took a moment to mull over the past few months. She had to give Kiba a whole new set of clothes when she let him out of the cell because the plain clothes could have the potential to be too telling, so she'd taken some liberties with his style. The standard issue black pants stayed, but she'd pilfered through her apartment and her brother's old clothes for some outgrown mesh shirts and a couple of black track jackets with a white stripe down the middle of the back and around the elbows. Those ones ran a little big, but she figured he would grow into them. Long-term planning and all that. The thing she was most mindful of, though, were the metal bands and brown tattoos on his person that would instantly announce his status. She had him wrap his ankles and forearms with bandages colored the signature Kumogakure red and told him never to leave his cell without them. Only when he agreed did she have him keep several rolls for convenience. But to answer your question, even though I didn't understand much of what you'd written on the walls, I understood enough that it belonged in advanced theory, she said. She tore a piece of flatbread and dipped it into her stew. Tell me, Kiba-kun, what led you to study seals? He bent over his bowl and slowly dug out another piece of meat, careful to get as little soup as possible. I wanted to know how the river seals. A pang rattled just behind Mabui's rib cage. Those seals, it nearly slipped to the back of her mind. After they'd been brought in from the border and examined by a seals expert sworn to secrecy, they'd confirmed the seal worked to fall under the cursed category due to its manipulation of body, min. D. and will, and had also confirmed its unwilling application by the apparent stress marks amongst the black lines. It sickened her to her stomach to hear of such a thing. The Kumor developed their sealing techniques through skin once a long time ago, but the move to paper mediums came because of the permanent, detrimental effects that were consequence with their use. Some of the older generations who still live with them were blind or deaf or had lost all movement in one arm or the other, or their skin on a leg had been burned so thoroughly even if the clear ink of the seal still remained. Or maybe they couldn't remember their own name longer than a day but could recite their favorite book cover, notation and all. Those who currently utilize powerful skin seal knew of the risks they took. But nowadays, there were so few. I ended up getting really into it, he continued. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. Sakura and Shino thought I could do a lot with it and I have a teach, back in my old village. Had. Akamaru set his head atop the hand his partner rested on his lap. Kiba cleared his throat and quickly fished for a jelly cube thing. Jelly cube. Oh, it was blood. Definitely congealed blood. But it's still cool. Am I allowed to look at the sealing books in your library? I don't think it would be too difficult to grant you restricted access to the lenticular library circuit. Lenti, Mabui-san, he whined, that's not a word. Quote. She covered her mouth as another laugh spilled past her lips. As she brushed a few strands of her hair behind an ear, she glanced out the window of the small restaurant they were tucked away in. The warm rays of an afternoon had lessened and stars began to speckle the sky. It's getting quite late. I'll have to return to Reikage-sama's office soon to prepare tomorrow's schedule. Okay, he nodded. He tipped his head side to side, wondering if he should take another sip of the demon stew before he left. Thanks for bringing us, Mabui-san. We've never had Kumo food before and Akamaru really likes the yak and bison legs. You're welcome, she smiled. As they stood to gather their bearings and venture out into the crisp air of her beloved village, a solemn feeling weighed down her bones and down to the soles of her feet as they walked the path to Katatumbo Penitentiary, then eventually some back roads so no one knew where they would end up. It was times like these she forgot Kiba was a prisoner. She forgot he wasn't a surname-less boy with a genius for seals and their theories, that he hadn't come to learn from the capital of the country like his village mates Shino the medic hopeful or Sakura the one-handed sword. She forgot that he hadn't been born on the borders, none of them, and that they were actually a product of one of their greatest enemies. But, some part of her murmured, an enemy that sealed their own and left them for dead. Single quote. Hey Mabui-san, I got a question. She glanced down at him. His face screwed up. What's a tragopan? They're a type of pheasant, and the ones served in that restaurant those native to this part of lightning. Quote, pheasants. What? Like, pretty chickens. She pressed her hand to her mouth again to smother her laughter. I suppose you can call them that, she agreed. And when he grinned, she couldn't help but think how Konoha didn't deserve a boy like him. Ah, what a shame. Naruto's ears perked up and turned to the sound of the voice. His hands dripped with the frigid water of the stream that rushed a step away from where he knelt, and he wiped his face dry on his jacket sleeve and pushed himself up to his feet. Jiraiya sat at the base of a tree with a pen between his teeth and his nose deep in one of his brainstorming notebooks. Did you say something, Erosenin? Just trying to figure out how to write this part and… what do you think about me adding a bit where my beautiful heroine gets a white letter then the kick is we don't know who it's from and bam. Cliffhanger, he exclaimed. Naruto rolled his eyes and shook the water from his hands. How about that? I don't even know what a white letter is. Huh, you don't. Jiraiya set down his notebook and squinted at his student. Aren't they supposed to teach you that kind of stuff at the academy? Quote, well they didn't, the boy sniffed. He didn't actually remember if they talked about